massacre of those involved in the Assad regime has begun in Syria. Turkey has launched an offensive against the Kurds in northern Syria. Israel is expanding its campaign against the Houthis. Saudi Arabia announced economic aid to Yemen, and Putin apologized to Azerbaijan for shooting down a plane. This is Ilya Brizak. Let's talk about it. A massive, violent crackdown on supporters of the Assad regime has begun in most rebel-held cities in Syria. At best, they are arrested. In other cases, they are beaten and sentenced without trial. According to the new authorities, they are doing this for past crimes against the people. Major battles between armed Alawites and rebel units are unfolding in the Alawite villages of Blaksa, Kurbat al-Hammam, and al-Kabu, west of Homs. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham are using rocket launchers and artillery. Experts say the Alawites don't stand a chance, and the clash will end in a quick deal. The Alawites are trying to defend some form of autonomy, but this is absolutely unacceptable for the new Syrian government, as we are talking about the coastal zone where key ports are located. Just yesterday, they were rebels. Subscribe to my channel right now. I tell you about the latest news from around the world. And today, they are legitimate security forces traveling through villages in search of Assadist officers. They carry out purges, lynchings, and extrajudicial killings. Most of the footage is strictly forbidden to be shown on YouTube, but the brutality with which the soldiers of the new government do it all is appalling. And the only question is how far this will go. HTS fighters restrained themselves for a long time, showed for a month that they could be adequate and merciful. But after the Americans withdrew the $10 million reward from Julani, the situation changed. Julani's militants have been unleashed, and there is literally a hunt for former Assad soldiers and officers all over Syria who have now become rebels. They are organizing themselves and fighting guerrilla battles against the HTS in Latakia and Tartus. And the new government is already taking casualties. According to some reports, Christians are not being touched yet. They ask the persecuted whether he is a Sunni or an Alawite. And if he answers Alawite, he literally faces death. For the record, sectarian execution is literally ethnic cleansing. On the coast of Syria right now, it's just a disaster. The HTS, starting to look for former Assad officers, is slipping into a hunt for all non-Sunnis. And the situation with Christians is becoming dangerous. But the new Damascus will have to rein in its own massacres of Christians if it is not to lose normalization of relations with the West. Syrian Christians in a popular assembly say the new government's security forces in Damascus have already begun evicting them from their homes. And when they are done with the Assadists, they will take them on. At the same time, experts admit that Iran will now try its best to find opportunities and try to establish the supply of weapons and financing to the underground in Latakia and Tartus on the coast of Syria. Meanwhile, the Turkish army is shelling dozens of Kurdish villages in northern Syria with a barrage of fire. Clashes between the Kurds and the Syrian National Army are intensifying. Dozens of strikes have hit Kurdish positions over the past few days. Kidnappings are increasing, and multiple casualties have been reported. What is noteworthy is that Turkey receives billions of dollars annually from the EU to support Syrian refugees, but much of that money goes precisely to the formation of pro-Turkish militias, which Turkey is now using throughout the region. And Europe is silent about this because it knows that Erdogan can send these refugees to Europe at any time. The Kurds are trying to withstand some serious pressure right now. The commander of the Syrian Democratic Forces, Mazloum Abdi, has asked the Kremlin to mediate talks between him and Turkey over the situation. Quote, "We ask Russia to play the role of mediator and help establish peaceful relations." According to other reports, the Kurds have asked Israel for help in convincing incoming U.S. President Trump to protect them from the Turkish yoke. But analysts are no less certain that the Kurds are in a critical situation at the moment. Meanwhile, while the hunt for Assadists and Kurds continues, the new government in Damascus is meeting with yet another distinguished guest. Delegations from the United States, Bahrain, and European countries are flying in to see Julani. And by all appearances, everyone wants a bigger piece of the action. For example, Turkey and Kuwait are sending large convoys of trucks with free aid to support the Syrian people. And the Lebanese army, to please Damascus, has handed over to the new authorities in Syria 70 officers of the former Assad regime who had previously fled to Lebanon during the fall of the regime. Some are convinced that the Assadists deserved it, as they tortured people for decades. Nevertheless, the ability to be humane and not descend into brutal lynching is precisely what distinguishes a civilized society from savages. Meanwhile, Israel's foreign minister says the new Syrian government is not a stable government, but a terrorist group. And many believe that the Israel Defense Forces took strategic heights and generally expanded its buffer zone in the Golan because it initially understood the risks base associated with the new government in Syria. At the same time, Israel decided to launch a broader campaign against the Houthis in Yemen. According to information, security agencies are gathering more intelligence on the Houthis, and the campaign will be a long one. At the moment, the Houthis are surrounded from several sides. Saudi Arabia has officially announced a $500 million economic aid package to the anti-Housitic government of Yemen, and a coalition of the U.S. and Britain is actively bombing strategically important Yemeni Houthi facilities in Sana'a and Hodeidah. A power station, oil storage facilities were destroyed, and the airport in the Yemeni capital was seriously damaged. At the same time, Russian intelligence in Syria said the U.S. and Britain are planning to storm the last two Russian bases in Latakia and Hamaymim by the hands of the new authorities in Damascus. The footage shows one of the former rebels filming himself right at the entrance to the Hamaymim base, having come close to the facility. He says the base is surrounded by Syrian Ministry of Defense forces and no one can get in or out, and that he is pleased to be in this position. It's also reported that the rebels have set up new roadblocks on the way to the Russian bases, and as they see the Russian military pass, Russian-speaking Syrian mercenaries from Dagestan, Uzbekistan, and Tajikistan shout, "Have a safe journey." For his part, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said that Russia has not received any requests from Syria to revise the agreements regarding Russian military bases in the country. Russia can talk to the new authorities in Damascus about preserving our rules and working conditions. But despite this, according to researcher Oliver Alexander, the Russians began actively using the AN-124 transport plane to evacuate their military assets from Syria to Libya. He found that the airliner has already made 2 flights between the countries. The point of transportation is Libya's Al-Qadim base, and is confident that satellite images will show many more flights in the near future. But Middle East experts are leaning toward Russia's ability to keep 2 key military bases in Hamaymim and Latakia. Next, Vladimir Putin apologized for the passenger plane shot down over Chechnya. Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev said that the plane that crashed in Aktau was damaged by ground fire. The head of state emphasized that there were numerous holes in the fuselage of the plane. Passengers and crew members, while still in the air, were injured by foreign particles that broke through the skin and got into the cabin of the plane, and that the testimonies of surviving flight attendants and passengers of the plane confirmed the fact of external physical technical impact. But he also noted that the Azerbaijan Airlines plane was not shot down on purpose. In an interview with AzTV, Aliyev outlined Azerbaijan's demands to Russia, officially conveyed on December 27th. 1. An official apology from Russia to Azerbaijan. 2. An admission of guilt. 3. Bringing to justice and prosecution of the perpetrators. 4th. Compensation to the Azerbaijani state and the injured passengers and crew. Quote, "One of the things that upset and surprised us was that Russian official structures put forward versions about the explosion of some gas cylinder. That is, it openly showed that the Russian side wants to hush up the issue, and this, of course, does no one any honor." Meanwhile, the press service of the Azerbaijani president reported that in Putin's call to Aliyev, Putin apologized for the fact that on December 25th, the passenger plane of Azerbaijan Airlines, flying on the Baku-Grozny route, was subjected in the Russian airspace to physical and technical impact from outside, resulting in a tragic incident. Once again expressed his deepest and most sincere condolences to the families of the victims and wished a speedy recovery to the injured. Write in the comments what you think about it. Busty and Patreon for those who want to support the channel. See you